In the halls of slasher cinema, no film's proverbial blade is more awash with blood than John Carpenter's 1978 seminal masterpiece, Halloween. The culmination and distillation of 2 decades worth of suspense and thriller films, Halloween would tie up the disparate elements of some of the most shocking subgenres of its era, mainly combining a deranged masked killer, an increasing body count, and an emphasis on shocking, gruesome murders to create a tense, voyeuristic experience that left audiences petrified. In other words, it codified the slasher subgenre. And though many competitors have cropped up over the years, Halloween still remains the oldest active slasher franchise, proving that the shape truly is a force with no equal. With over 45 years of films, novels, and comic books under its belt, the Halloween franchise certainly has its fair share of messy chronology. But unlike most of its competitors, Halloween's story is divided between multiple continuities, many of them stemming from the same origin point, while a few are entirely disconnected. This means many of its narrative problems can be hand-waved away, since subsequent films eagerly drop any loose plot threads, meaning they are not and never will be relevant to the films that come after. We never have to wonder why Michael has new abilities, why his backstory and motivation change between films, or why characters are related in one film but not another. It's simple to a fault. But simple isn't how we do things here at the Haddonfield Registry, is it? My name is Mr. October, aka Slasher with an X. Join me tonight as we take an extended nighttime stroll through the idyllic, tree-lined streets of Haddonfield. Follow me past the bustling businesses of Main Street, deep into the town's labyrinthian rows of suburban homes. The town has a reputation for this time of year, so keep your eyes open and your ears sharp for anything untoward. And above all else, stay close to me, as we make our way to this local haunt here, known to the town's children as the Spook House. Here, 63 years ago, in that upstairs room on the right, the landscape of horror cinema would change shape completely. Welcome back to Ultimate Timelines. With Under the Lake Parts 1 and 2 completed, we'll call that Volume 1, we can finally begin discussing the Halloween franchise. If this is your first time diving in, let me give a brief recap. Ultimate Timelines is a long-form series dedicated to reconstructing the true continuity of horror's most iconic slasher franchises. Additionally, each entry into the Ultimate Timeline series provides a unique experience and gimmick. For Under the Lake, that was ignoring many commonly accepted beliefs in favor of a timeline that made sense to me. For The 11th Hour, we'll be looking at the Halloween franchise and its multiple continuities, mapping out every single project and definitively categorizing it into one of many established timelines. That may sound straightforward, but trust me, we've got plenty of surprises in store. Now, normally, this is where I'd throw up the Chapter 1 card and dive right in to discuss the film's events, but it's not going to be that easy this go around. When we looked at the Friday the 13th series, we began with the first film, of course. That was a no-brainer, since there's only one original Friday the 13th, only one version of it anyway. Yes, it received a novelization, but aside from some backstory written for Alice that had been restored, it didn't add much, if anything, new. But something you may not know is that Halloween has 3 similar yet slightly different versions. The first, of course, is the 1978 theatrical release. This is the cut of the film most everyone knows and remembers, and the only one that really matters today. Then, in 1979, author Richard Curtis, under his wonderfully clever pseudonym Curtis Richards, published a paperback novelization of the film which has many new scenes added, and even gave a whole new backstory for Michael that would go on to heavily influence 1981's Halloween 2, as well as the entire Thorn trilogy. And finally, the extended edition, which features 3 brand new scenes filmed for the TV broadcast cut, written during production of 1981's Halloween 2, specifically to help bridge the 2 films' narratives and pad out the running time. So which one do we go off of? Your first instinct is to summarily say, the theatrical release, duh. And yes, in anyone else's video you might be right, but that's just not any fun. In this deep dive, we'll be combining the theatrical release, extended edition, and the novelization into one hypothetical super Halloween that will help provide more narrative foundation for the Cult of Thorn timeline branch to come. And it'll be an interesting narrative parallel to many aspects of the later sequels. We'll break down this new super timeline of events from start to finish, then discuss ways in which the new context changes our understanding of the classic story. We'll do our best to iron out any inconsistencies and contradictions as we encounter them. I'm sure there'll be a few. When applicable, the theatrical film takes priority over the extended edition, and both take priority over the novel. For the theatrical and extended editions, I'll show clips from the source, but novelization scenes will be represented with images I took from the reprint, Halloween Illustrated. The story begins with a prologue, not in 1963, but rather set millennia ago, at the dawn of the Celtic Age in Northern Ireland. We follow a deformed young man by the name of Enda, an outcast of his village and family, as he pines for the tribe's youngest princess, Deirdre. One day not long before the annual festival of Samhain, the celebration marking the end of the harvest and beginning of winter, Enda tries to plead his heart to Deirdre and asks for her own. But upon approaching, his appearance horrifies and startles the princess, who mistakes him for a rapist. Her panic becomes a spectacle, further humiliating Enda and socially distancing him from the tribe. Later, now during Samhain, Enda watches lustfully and enviously as Deirdre is waltzed around the Celtic bonfire by her betrothed, Calain. As Enda loses himself to his drink, he finally snaps, and approaching the lovers with the same blade he uses to butcher livestock, slices them open from end to end. Not a moment later, Enda is ripped apart limb from limb by his fellow tribesmen. His remains are left to rot along a hillside known to rest traitors and scum, and the druid king Gwynwil commands a shaman to curse Enda's soul to forever walk the earth, reliving both his wicked deeds and eventual punishment, forever cursed to take new earthly shape. I am no historian, but from what I can tell from 20 minutes of solid research, they mostly agree that dawn of the Celtic Age was sometime between 1200 and 800 BC. The story then moves on to 1963, but not where you might expect. We enter the quaint, cozy living room of Grandma Myers as she gives her disapproval at a 6-year-old Michael Myers' clown costume. Per Grandma, people have lost the plot to Halloween completely, and now it's a shadow of its former glory. Where folks once understood the point was to ward off spirits, now they seem to tease or even invite them. Notably, Michael speaks plainly in the novel, and more than you might have imagined. He rebukes his grandmother's traditionalism and leaves to don his costume. Michael's mother, Edith, confides in Grandma that Michael is hearing voices which tell him to say he hates people, and on top of that, he's having violent nightmares. We learn Michael's great-grandfather, Grandma's father-in-law, also heard voices and had nightmares, but Michael and his mother leave for the Halloween party before Grandma is able to fully divulge that story. What she does tell them about, however, is the story of the Boogeyman, a mischievous, masked entity that roamed the countryside when Grandma was young, slaughtering the livestock and setting homes alight, all for no other reason than to spread chaos. It's worth noting that Michael immediately perks up during this story and appears to idolize the Boogeyman and his ability to wear a mask and do whatever he wants. Very, very interesting. Following this, we still are not yet in familiar territory, though we're dangerously close to it. Michael's sister Judith readies herself for her boyfriend, Danny, when some kids ring the doorbell. Among them is Michael, who makes a comment about killing Judith if she doesn't pass out the candy. When he's called out by his sister, his response is, "I'm not Michael Myers, I'm a clown." Clearly he's acting out the mask-wearing mischief his grandmother told him about earlier. Danny arrives and Judith shoos the kids away, leading us into the memorable film opening we all know. We take on the perspective of a nightcrawler who voyeuristically watches Judith and Danny passionately embrace. When the teens head upstairs to enact their love, the watcher silently slips into the kitchen via the back door, where he draws a knife and lies in wait. When Danny leaves the house, Judith heads back upstairs to settle in for the night, and the watcher creeps up the steps behind her to her room. Wearing a clown mask, the watcher violently attacks Judith, stabbing her repeatedly before he hurriedly descends the stairs to the front door. Upon exiting the home, he's met by the homeowners, Mr. and Mrs. Myers. The former reaches down and plucks the clown mask from their 6-year-old son's face. Now, of course, all 3 stories tell the same event, the murder of Judith Myers, but the novelization tells it a bit differently. Given that the story opts to tell you right away something is wrong with Michael, they make no attempt to hide that he's the stalker planning to kill Judith. The same voices his mother described to his grandma are telling him to slaughter Judith and her boyfriend. He sees visions of another couple dancing before a grand bonfire, obviously alluding to Deidre and Kalaine. He's experiencing Enda's POV and feeling that same vile jealousy and hatred for love. The voice, likely Enda's voice, but possibly accompanied by all who've borne his curse since then, pesters Michael all night long during the Halloween party, urging him to return home and stop the dancing lovers. Additionally, there are some slight differences in character timelines between the movies and the novelization, like when Danny leaves, or whether Michael has the mask on before or after entering the house. In the novel, he has it on already, whereas in the movie, he grabs it off the floor of his bedroom before walking into Judith's room. The novel is full of small inconsistencies like this, so I won't list all of them. Following this, in the novelization, we're treated to a brief side story involving Dr. Sam Loomis, child psychiatrist and the primary doctor for the Smiths Grove youth. We first meet him during Michael's sentencing, where the presiding Judge Christopher sentences the boy to 15 years of institutionalism. The judge orders Loomis to treat the boy and report his findings back to the court twice a year until they feel the boy is fit to be returned back into society. This transitions directly into his first report to the judge, given 6 months after the sentencing, where he lays out his case for Michael's brutality. Being the youngest, Michael was of course the most vulnerable and subject to bullying, but all slights against Michael, big or small, real or imagined, are met with the same aggressive retribution. The kicker? No one has ever caught Michael doing anything. To the staff, he's the ideal patient. The judge, who already felt intense guilt for sentencing Michael to that hellhole, also doesn't buy it, and tells Loomis he'll be seriously considering the boy's release come Loomis's next visit, should he fail to provide anything concrete. Not long after this, in 1964, Michael requests to have a Halloween party, and Loomis sees it as the perfect chance to catch Michael in the act. The boy is bested in a game of musical chairs early in the night by a teenager named Sophie, and Loomis waits for his reprisal, hoping to finally catch him in the act. Later, when the patients are bobbing for apples, during Sophie's turn, the lights cut out. When they come back on, Sophie's been drowned in the vat of apples. Loomis finds Michael nearby, smiling, dry as a bone. But despite failing to gather even a single witness to Michael's deeds, Loomis would ultimately have his way, as Judge Christopher dies before the second report can be delivered. His unnamed predecessor, who has no guilt about Michael's sentencing, agrees to keep the boy locked away until his 21st birthday. Now, before we map these dates to our timeline, let's turn to the extended edition's first new scene, which is essentially an adaptation of this Loomis side story. Dr. Loomis is meeting with 2 Smiths Grove officials regarding the judge's decision to have Michael kept there. They read out the decision, this time made by Judge Walter Ward, which reiterates what we just went over. Michael is to be remanded to Smiths Grove until his 21st birthday. It seems to be some sort of appeals board, as they're merely reading the decision out loud and allowing Loomis to argue against it. He does so by suggesting Michael be moved to the maximum security ward of Litchfield, a nearby institute. He argues Michael is dangerous, despite his catatonic state. When the officials suggest someone else should take over as Michael's doctor, Loomis relents. As he leaves, he pops into Michael's room and watches as the boy stares out the window. He tells Michael that, while he may have everyone else fooled by his catatonic act, he can't fool him. Given that this appeals meeting is happening 6 months after Loomis was assigned to the boy, it's clearly adapting that entire narrative bridge in the novel between the prologue and the story proper, and condensing it down into a single moment. All the same info is relayed to the viewer. Michael's a danger, Loomis is sounding the alarm just 6 months in, but he's ignored. Further, Carpenter doubles down on his villain's unknowability in a way the novel fails to capture. Instead of Michael feigning normalcy and Loomis's suspicions stemming from unseen acts of aggression, Michael instead falls into a catatonic state, with Loomis's suspicions being simply that Michael is faking it. Both stories lead Loomis to the same conclusion. What happened in 1963 was not a mistake, and Michael intends to kill again. So, when does this scene take place? In the novelization, the first report on Michael is held before the summer of 1964, 6 months after the sentencing, which had to be no earlier than November. If the trial was in November or December, 6 months later would be May or June, which lines up with summer being around the corner. The extended edition also states this is 6 months after the sentencing, so I feel no reason we can't carry over that extra bit of info from the book. Since the films take precedence over the novel when it comes to discrepancies, Michael's catatonia is the definitive backstory, not the charming and polite orator. This means the Halloween party likely didn't happen, as it was at Michael's request, but also there likely isn't any reason to think Michael tormented his peers in the hospital, since Loomis states he literally does nothing but lie in wait. It's clear Carpenter was toying with the idea of Michael growing dormant between killings, or between Halloweens maybe, whereas Curtis saw him as always mischievous. That said, if Michael did torment the other patients at Smith's Grove in your headcanon, that's fine with me. The three versions converge once more on the night of October 30th, 1978, in the town of Smith's Grove, Illinois. Dr. Loomis and a nurse by the name of Marion are en route to the sanitarium, only to find the patients wandering freely in the yard outside. Loomis gets out to investigate, finding a security guard with a twisted neck in the novelization, while Marion is assaulted by a shaggy-haired patient who commandeers their station wagon. Loomis recognizes this to be Michael, telling Marion, "The evil is gone from here." We finally arrived on October 31st, 1978, in Haddonfield, Illinois. Halloween. We're introduced to our heroine, Laurie Strode, whose father runs Strode Realty. On her way to school, she's asked to leave a key under the mat of the old Myers house for the new owners. Along the way, she runs into Tommy Doyle, a local child she babysits. When he learns she's headed to the Myers house, Tommy refuses to go near, stating that everyone knows the spook house is haunted. Unbeknownst to either, Michael has slipped into the home undetected and closely watches Laurie as she leaves for school. The extended edition then returns us to Smith's Grove for the second new scene, wherein Loomis surveys the damage of Michael's escape. Per the nurses, whoever was meant to watch the floor that night was mysteriously gone, possibly an unseen victim of Michael's carnage, or maybe even an accomplice. The nurses surmise Michael smashed the windows of his room to free himself, then freed all the other inmates and forced them out into the courtyard. And, maybe most ominously of all, he trashed his own room while doing so, ripping everything inside to shreds and carving "Sister" into the door. Loomis then speaks with Dr. Wynn, the administrator of the facility, who denies any responsibility for Michael's escape. He urges Wynn to notify the Haddonfield police on Michael's imminent return, but the man refuses, leaving Loomis with only one option. He peels out of the parking lot in his four-door, en route to Haddonfield. Back in the small town, Laurie attends her lit class, where she's subjected to lectures on fate and destiny. But upon peeking outside, she spots a strange station wagon parked across the street, and a pale, motionless man staring directly at her. A moment later, he and his metallic mount are gone. About now is where the novel starts taking liberties with the sequence of events, so we're going to switch over to using the films as the timeline template and bringing in novel events out of order when needed. Thought I'd mention it. The afternoon bell rings, and Tommy leaves school with a large pumpkin in hand, though he's being harassed by some older kids. They tease him about the boogeyman before tripping him, causing him to crush his own pumpkin. When I was a kid, this scene made me cry. As the kids disperse, Michael silently watches Tommy sulk away before he hops into the station wagon to go cruising. Elsewhere, Loomis phones into the police to try and warn them of who's coming, when a truck, haphazardly pulled into a ditch with its door flung open, catches his attention. Inside it, he finds the loose white sheets of a Smith's Grove patient, as well as a matchbox he remembers last seeing in the stolen station wagon. Loomis knows Michael was here. But what he doesn't know is that the truck driver's occupant is dead not 20 feet away, thrown carelessly into some weeds. Back in Haddonfield, Laurie and her friends, Linda and Annie, leave school for the day, giggling and coordinating afternoon plans like friends do, when the same station wagon from earlier drives by. Annie berates the driver for speeding, who in return comes to a screeching, violent halt, only to drive off a moment later, leaving the girls with frayed nerves. Later, when she's alone with Annie, Laurie sees the same pale man watching them from behind a large hedge, but when Annie scopes it out, They find no one. Shortly after Annie heads into her home, a nervous and distracted Laurie bumps into Sheriff Brackett, Annie's father, who is also coming home, giving us this iconic line.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
All three stories follow Laurie returning home, but in the novelization, she briefly shares a scene with her mother. She asks her if she's ever met anyone evil, specifically naming Michael Myers. Her mother finds it funny she would ask, given that the pastor on the previous Sunday also brought up Michael, stating he was a reminder that evil exists in our world, and evil is put here by the devil to keep us on our toes. She thanks her mother and runs up to her room, where she plans to call Annie to discuss the night's plans, when she peers out her window, only to find the same pale man from before, standing in her neighbor's backyard, looking directly up at her. Only this time, he's gone in an instant, leaving the poor girl trembling. From here, the extended edition gives us its final new scene, where a freshly showered Laurie lets in an excited Linda, who states she was followed over by the same man in the station wagon from earlier in the afternoon, revealing he's actively watching all three girls. Laurie then leaves with Annie to joyride around the town while smoking a spliff, before heading to the Wallace household, where Annie will be babysitting Lindsay Wallace for the night. Laurie will be babysitting Tommy Doyle at the Doyle household across the street. Little do either know, the station wagon is tailing them. We briefly catch up with Loomis, who has now arrived in Haddonfield. In the original 1978 film, there really isn't a reason given for why he's come to this cemetery to check on Judith's grave, or how he'd know Michael would take it. We're left to assume it's something from their shared decade and a half together. But thanks to the extended edition, which shows us Michael still thinks of his sister even into 1978, we can infer he got the hunch from this scene. Anyway, Laurie and Annie pass by Main Street, where they find Sheriff Brackett responding to a break-in at a hardware store, where rope, knives, and Halloween masks were stolen. They pass on, when Loomis, now freshly in town, meets with Brackett. The film jumps forward here, but the novel goes further, with Loomis and Brackett speaking in the latter's car. While dismissive of Loomis's concerns about Michael's return, he does relent when he starts connecting the dots, and he shares what little info he knows about Michael's great-grandpa, who also committed a murder on Halloween. Loomis asks the sheriff if the great-grandfather spoke of hearing voices, and if he ever mentioned Celtic names like Deidre and Kalain, meaning Michael has heard those names. The novel goes on to give us Michael's POV as he follows the girls in their two-door. For those who really enjoyed Halloween 6, you'll be happy to learn that Michael is painfully aroused, which is gross and shows his confliction is sexual in nature, which is pretty obviously implied in the original film. Even John Carpenter, who has readily rebuked any accusation of the film being a morality tale, has also readily reinforced the notion that both Michael and Laurie represent sexual repression in adolescence, and how that manifests. AKA, you need to smoke a bowl and get laid. Michael also recounts how the voices were so strong that night in 1963 that it was almost as if he was shoved by invisible hands back to his home and away from the Halloween party. Young Michael wasn't old enough, his internal voice not loud enough, to overpower Enda's voice in his head. But adult Michael doesn't have that problem. Not only that, he's now physically strong enough to evade capture this time, unlike when he was 6, meaning this Michael has zero intention of going back to Smith's Grove. After Annie and Laurie each go to their respective gigs, Michael follows the latter, testing the doors and windows for anything unsecured, ultimately finding a pair of unlocked French doors. He also passes 2 kids on the sidewalk, who he notes would be easy to kill, but too public, so he carries on, which I think is a fun touch. From here, he watches Annie and describes his, kitchen knife throbbing painfully as he waits for the voice to get louder. Loomis and Brackett explore the Myers home for signs of Michael's return, finding a dead, half-eaten dog inside. Eventually, Loomis opens up to Brackett a bit about his time with Michael, where he delivers the blackest eyes speech.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
What do we do?
At this point, like anyone would be after hearing this in an abandoned house in the middle of the night, Brackett's fully on board. The pair devise a plan. Loomis will remain at the house and hope to catch Michael upon his return, while Brackett continues patrolling the streets. As the girls watch their respective kids, Michael gets closer and closer to Annie, first by killing the Wallace's dog to avoid detection, then deliberately making noise to cause fear. He also spies on the Doyle house for good measure, where he's spotted by Tommy, who begins to lose his shit to Lori about the boogeyman, putting her further on edge. Annie gets a call from Paul, her boyfriend. The pair had to cancel plans at the last minute because he'd been grounded, but he sneaked out of the house, and now she's going to dump Lindsay on Lori while she drives to pick him up. But after she hops into her car, Michael pops up from the back seat and slices her neck. Tommy once again spots the boogeyman, this time taking Annie's body inside the home. Back at the spook house, the same kids bullying Tommy earlier in the film, Lonnie, Richie, and Keith, are each attempting to brave it out and reach the house's front door, but Loomis successfully scares them off from a nearby bush. Brackett sneaks up on the doctor, checking back in. Nothing unusual has happened since, and Brackett's faith is faltering, but Loomis busts out another speech, and suddenly the sheriff is back on. Linda and her boyfriend, Bob, pull up to the Wallace household shit-faced and start making out on the first floor, assuming everything is okay and that Annie and Paul will be back any moment. Unknown to either, Michael watches in the shadows. In the novel, Michael describes how killing Annie satiated Enda's voice, but seeing Linda and Bob making love caused it to stir once more. In fact, the novel plays up Michael's breathing as something signaling his arousal, not just a sound effect to indicate that it's a man in a mask. After the teens make love, Bob goes downstairs to fetch a beer, and he's pinned to the wall. Michael returns upstairs, now wearing a white bed sheet with Bob's glasses over top. The boy loves tricks as much as he apparently loves treats. He strangles Linda while the girl makes a call to Lori, and even picks the phone up to listen to Lori on the other end, in what might be the most disturbing shot of the whole film. Outside, Dr. Loomis roams the streets surrounding the Myers home and finds the Smith's Grove station wagon. Knowing Michael is nearby and likely to strike, if he hasn't already, he quickens his pace. Growing increasingly paranoid from the day's events, including the non-stop talk of the boogeyman, her unending daydreaming about evil, the pale man who'd been stalking her, and now her friend's odd behaviors, Lori decides to venture out to the Wallace household. She finds that not only is the power out, but neither Annie and Paul nor Linda and Bob are anywhere to be found. Climbing the steps, she spots a faint orange glow coming from the master. Inside, she discovers Annie's lifeless body lying on the bed beneath the stolen headstone of Judith Myers. Immediately after, Bob and Linda's bodies are revealed. All of Lori's friends are dead inside this home, and she's all alone in the darkened upstairs with God knows who. This is when Michael makes his grand entrance, in what is known as the boogeyman shot. He slices at Lori, ripping her arm open, but she tumbles over the home's railing, crashing into the step landing below and twisting her ankle. Still, that doesn't stop her. She's up and through the kitchen before Michael, and eventually she gets back into the Doyle household, where she commands Tommy to lock himself and Lindsay in an upstairs room. Somehow, in the few seconds between her coming in and checking to see if the phone works, it doesn't. Michael has managed to slip into the side door right there. She hears his breathing, which prompts her to get low and arm herself with a knitting needle. Michael suddenly appears from the only place he could realistically have been hiding, but he whiffs his stab a second time, and Lori knits the needle deep into his neck, sending him to the floor. Outside, Brackett pulls up on Loomis, who briefs the former about the station wagon 3 blocks back and sends him off to keep patrolling, while he continues down the street. Lori heads back upstairs to check on the kids, but the boogeyman has followed her up. Sending the kids into the bathroom, Lori barricades herself in the master bedroom's closet, but Michael is soon upon her. Here she gets a clear view of his pale face and finds it's nothing more than a cheap rubber Halloween mask. Thinking quickly, she unwraps a coat hanger and drives it deep into Michael's left eye. He fumbles the knife, which she intercepts, sending it into his gut, and he tumbles backward onto the ground. Lori now commands the kids to run outside for help, which catches Loomis's attention. The novelization expands on this moment, depicting the doctor outright grappling the screaming children to get them to explain what's wrong. He then walks them to a neighbor who he instructs to call the police and ask for Sheriff Brackett and to tell them he's found their mutual friend. The neighbor asks if this is serious, as he's been trick-or-treated to death. Loomis, brandishing his revolver, hisses back, "You don't know what death is!" Here, we're going to switch up the format a bit. In the film's ending, Laurie attempts to catch her breath, but she severely underestimates her foe. With her guard down, Michael inhumanly rises from the floor and staggers over to her, gripping her with two unbelievably strong hands to choke the life out of her. With no more weapons, no more plans, no more outs, Laurie makes a final last-ditch move. She yanks Michael's mask off, revealing the strikingly human visage underneath. Nothing like the grotesque faces of typical Halloween ghouls. Michael drops her briefly to redon his mask, giving Loomis, who had entered the home and silently ascended the stairs, just enough of a window to get his first shot in, sending Michael deep into the master bedroom. Loomis lets off another 5 shots, each hitting Michael square in the body, and the shape tumbles back first over the balcony and is left sprawled out in the grass, seemingly dead. Laurie and her savior share a look. Of course, the famous final lines are said. And as Loomis goes to inspect Michael's body, he finds only a depression in the yard. His target slipped through his fingers once again. Loomis peers into the night with the look of resignation, as the sound of Michael's labored breathing fills every last vignette of Haddonfield, a town forever changed. The novel's ending, however, plays out a bit differently, and in my opinion is actually better constructed, so we'll give it its own retelling. Laurie still attempts to catch her breath, and Michael still inhumanly rises from the floor and staggers over to her, but this time he puts her into a headlock, aiming to crush her neck. She does manage to get a hand between his arm and her neck, but it's not doing much as he's now breaking her wrist to get through it. She weakly paws at his mask with her free hand, but she has almost no strength. In comes Loomis, who gets off a shot at Michael, who throws Laurie, then stumbles into the master bedroom. Laurie crashes to the floor and finds she's now holding the rubber mask, having yanked it off during the gunfire. She looks up to see Michael, one eye bulging, the other missing, his black hair greasy and thick and stuck to his forehead and face. Loomis again opens up on Michael, sending him out into the lawn, in this timeline without his mask. Laurie collapses into the doctor's arms, relieved to be alive. The pair exchange quick pleasantries before Loomis goes to check on Michael from the balcony, finding his lifeless body. Despite this, he reloads his revolver anyway, and the pair slowly make their way outside to the patch of grass Michael fell to, only to find nothing more than a few bits of broken glass. No depression, not even a single drop of blood. Let me read the final words to you. Until this moment, he had hoped against hope that the entity he had pursued to this place was a thing of flesh and blood like himself, though deep in his heart he had known it would be otherwise. The evidence pointed not merely to another interpretation, but, as he had said to Sheriff Brackett, to another dimension. He shuddered, wondering what little boy at this very moment was tossing in his sleep, tortured by a dream of tragic love that had occurred far away and long ago, tormented by a voice commanding the dreamer to take revenge. Laurie's nails dug into his shoulder as she stared like a soldier in shell shock at the empty place on the lawn. "It was the boogeyman, wasn't it?" she murmured. "As a matter of fact," Loomis replied, "it was." Thus ends the story of Halloween 1978, the night he came home. For now, we're left with this simple timeline. Now, before you move to the comments section to argue the merits of me mashing up the different versions like this, don't worry. It's not like we're taking the book's new lore into account for anything outside the Cult of Thorn storyline, and as I mentioned before, we're only doing that in this specific instance because that novelization directly influenced Halloweens 2, 4, 5, and 6, with entire scenes being adapted into 2 of the listed sequels. Beyond that, you may be left wondering what exactly is going on with Michael. What otherworldly affliction did the Celtic shaman put on him? Is it actually a curse, or is Michael just a depraved serial killer? Michael's bloodline is implied to be tainted. We know this because Michael's great-grandfather had similar voices in dreams and committed similar crimes on Halloween. But both the novel's prologue and the closing moments imply that there will be other kids outside of this one bloodline that will feel Enda's call, giving the impression that it's a wide-reaching call. So in essence, all of humanity is tainted, as it could happen to anyone. And this is as good a time as any to bring up a little pet theory I have, which is that Grandpa Nordstrom, Michael's great-grandfather and Grandma Myers' father-in-law, the same man who supposedly had nightmares and heard voices and then killed 2 dancers at a Halloween party, was the same individual roaming around killing animals and setting homes ablaze when Grandma was a child. It just makes thematic sense to me that, like how Michael attempted to resist the voices at first but couldn't, maybe so too did Nordstrom, who only killed livestock and committed arson as a way to placate these voices before he couldn't resist anymore, kinda like how a serial killer would work. This would also explain how the man managed to live well into his old age before any of this was noticed by others, unlike Michael, who was too young to know how to disguise his actions. There really isn't much more to the theory beyond that, but Nordstrom would be a middle-aged man when Grandma's growing up. But it works just as well if it were someone completely unseen. The boogeyman could be anyone, after all. And lastly, you may be wondering if I have anything to say about the classroom scene about fate, or the fact that something supernatural is going on with Michael, or that Michael's curse can be read as an analogy for general serial killer madness, or even the ability for fear and paranoia to easily spread and affect through vulnerable and heightened people. These are all pertinent themes of the film that would each go on to form the basis for sequels, remakes, and reimaginings, and as such, each will get their own moment in a respective follow-up, starting with the most overtly supernatural Halloween timeline of all, the Cult of Thorn timeline.